Dr. Veltara floated gracefully through the airlock of the massive research station, orbiting the small blue planet called Earth. Her skin, a beautiful translucent blue that seemed to glow from within, caught the station's bright lights and cast dancing patterns on the metal walls around her. She moved with the fluid elegance that all Aquari possessed, her long limbs flowing like water as she navigated the corridors. This was supposed to be just another routine assignment. Veltara had spent the last 30 years of her life studying alien biology, carefully documenting the inner workings of species from across the galaxy. 47 different forms of life had passed through her laboratory, each one teaching her something new about how evolution shaped living beings. Some had hearts that beat only once per minute. Others had bones made of crystallized minerals that could cut through steel. A few even had organs that could completely shut down for months at a time during harsh seasons. But humans? They were supposed to be simple. The galactic reports described them as a young species, barely crawling out of their home system. Primitive technology, basic social structures, nothing particularly special about their biology. This should be an easy study, maybe 2 weeks of scanning and measurements, then back to more interesting work with the advanced civilizations. The medical bay doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a surprisingly clean and organized space. The equipment looked crude compared to what she was used to, but it seemed functional enough. Standing near an examination table was a human male, medium height with dark hair and kind eyes behind thin glasses. "Welcome aboard," he said, stepping forward with his right hand extended. Dr. Kim Hyun had been assigned as her liaison for this project, and she had read his file during the journey here, competent enough for a primitive species, with degrees in something called medicine and biology. Veltara looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, remembering the briefing about human customs. Physical contact as a greeting seemed so strange and potentially dangerous. Most civilized species avoided unnecessary touching, understanding that it could spread diseases or cause accidental injury. But she had been instructed to follow human protocols to maintain good relations. She reached out and grasped his hand, immediately surprised by several things. First, his skin was incredibly warm, almost hot compared to what she was used to. The Aquari maintained body temperatures close to their cool ocean homeworld, and most other species she had worked with were similarly temperature-controlled. Second, his grip was firm, much stronger than she had expected. The pressure he applied would have been uncomfortable for most species, yet he seemed to be holding back rather than using his full strength. "The pleasure is mine, Dr. Kim," she replied, releasing his hand and noting how her own appendage tingled from the contact. "I understand you have prepared volunteers for our comparative study?" Dr. Kim nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, we have 2 excellent subjects ready for you. Lee Min and Park So-young both volunteered when they heard about the project. They're excited to be part of first contact scientific research." This struck Veltara as odd. In her experience, most intelligent species were cautious about medical examinations, especially from alien researchers. The procedures could be uncomfortable, sometimes invasive, and there was always risk involved when dealing with unknown technology. Yet these humans seemed eager to participate. "They are both healthy adults," Dr. Kim continued, "perfect baseline subjects for establishing human anatomical norms. Lee Min is 28 years old, works as an engineer on the station. Park So-young is 31, one of our communications specialists. Both have clean medical histories and passed all our standard health screenings." As they walked toward the preparation area, Veltara activated her portable scanner, a device that could analyze biological functions from several meters away. She began taking preliminary readings of Dr. Kim as they moved, expecting to see the usual patterns she had grown familiar with over decades of work. The numbers that appeared on her display made her pause mid-step. She looked at the readings, again then at Dr. Kim, then back at her scanner. Something was very wrong with either her equipment or with this human. According to her instruments, Dr. Kim should have been in severe medical distress, possibly dying. Yet he continued walking and talking normally, completely unaware that her scanner was detecting what appeared to be catastrophic biological failures throughout his entire system. His heart was beating far too fast, His bone density readings were impossibly low, and his neural activity showed patterns that in any other species would indicate serious brain damage. Veltara decided to say nothing for now. Perhaps there was interference from the station systems, or maybe her equipment needed recalibration after the long journey. She would run proper scans on the volunteers and surely get more reasonable results. But deep in her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, these humans were going to be far more interesting than anyone had expected. Veltara stared at her scanner in complete disbelief. The small device hummed quietly in her hands as she pressed the recalibration button for what felt like the 100th time. The numbers on the display flickered, reset themselves, and then showed exactly the same impossible readings as before. She tapped the side of the scanner, wondering if the long journey through space had somehow damaged her most trusted piece of equipment. "There must be interference from your station's systems," she muttered under her breath, her voice carrying a note of frustration that she rarely allowed herself to show. In all her years of scientific work, she had never encountered readings that made so little sense. Dr. Kim stood nearby, watching her struggle with patient curiosity. His arms were crossed casually, and there was a small smile on his face, as if he found her confusion somewhat amusing. "Is there a problem with the equipment?" he asked gently. Veltara looked up from her scanner, then back at Li Min, who was sitting comfortably on the examination table. The young human engineer seemed completely relaxed, swinging his legs slightly like a child waiting for a treat. According to her readings, he should have been unconscious or worse by now. "These cardiovascular readings," she began, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "Your subject shows a resting heart rate of 70 beats per minute. That's not just unusual, it's catastrophically fast. Most intelligent species throughout the galaxy maintain heart rates between 12 and 20 beats per minute, maximum." She had studied the Zephyrians, whose massive hearts beat only 8 times per minute, efficiently pumping their thick, nutrient-rich blood through their enormous bodies. The crystalline Vorthak had no hearts at all, instead using a system of pressure chambers that activated just twice per minute. Even the energetic Skitari, known for their hyperactive behavior, never exceeded 25 beats per minute. Li Min let out a cheerful laugh that made Veltara jump slightly. "Oh, that's actually pretty normal for me," he said, as if discussing the weather. "My girlfriend always jokes that I'm too relaxed because my heart rate is usually in the 60s. Sometimes it goes up to 180 when I exercise or play sports." The words hit Veltara like a physical blow. Her own secondary hearts, the backup organs that all Aquari possessed, nearly stopped beating entirely. She gripped her scanner tighter, her translucent fingers turning almost white with pressure. 180 beats per minute, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That would kill any known species instantly. The cardiac stress alone would cause immediate system failure. Dr. Kim stepped closer, genuinely concerned now by her reaction. "Are you feeling all right? You look a bit pale." Veltara ignored his question, instead focusing intensely on her scanner's display. She switched to bone density analysis, hoping to find at least one normal reading that would help restore her confidence in either her equipment or her understanding of biology. What she saw made everything worse. "Your skeleton," she said slowly, staring at Li Min as if seeing him for the first time. "Your skeleton appears to be made primarily of calcium phosphate compounds. That's essentially decorative coral material, not structural bone." The comparison wasn't entirely accurate, but it was the closest thing in her experience. The reef builders of Andromeda used calcium phosphate to create beautiful but fragile artistic sculptures. The material was lovely to look at, but would crumble under any serious pressure. The idea of using it as the primary structural support for a living body was absurd. Li Min tilted his head curiously. "Is that bad? I mean, I've never really thought about what my bones are made of." "Bad?" Veltara's voice cracked slightly. "It's impossible. The Granithians have bones made of compressed metal alloys. The Rocklings literally grow stone skeletons from their planet's minerals. The flexari have cartilaginous structures that can bend completely without breaking, but calcium phosphate? That's what primitive ocean creatures use to build temporary shells. She ran another scan, this time focusing on muscle density and nervous system activity. The results were equally baffling. Li Min's muscles appeared to be made of simple protein fibers, nothing like the advanced biomechanical tissues found in most spacefaring species. His nervous system showed electrical activity patterns that should have indicated severe neurological damage. "How are you even standing?" she asked, her scientific composure finally cracking. "According to every biological principle I understand, you should have collapsed hours ago." Dr. Kim and Li Min exchanged a glance, and she could see them trying not to smile. There was something they weren't telling her. Some piece of information that would make all of this make sense. "Dr. Veltara," Kim said gently, "maybe we should start with some basic questions about human biology before we continue with the detailed scans." But Veltara was already running diagnostics on Park So-young, the second volunteer who had just entered the room. The young communications specialist waved cheerfully and hopped onto the second examination table. Within seconds, Veltara's scanner was showing the same impossible readings. 2 humans, same impossible biology, same defiance of everything she thought she knew about how living creatures were supposed to work. She set down her scanner and looked at both humans, really looked at them. They were talking and laughing, moving with easy grace, showing no signs of the medical emergencies her equipment insisted they were experiencing. Either her understanding of biology was completely wrong, or these humans were the most remarkable survival anomaly the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Kim could see the confusion and frustration written all over Veltara's face as she stared at her scanner for what must have been the 20th time. Her translucent blue skin had taken on a slightly darker hue, which he had learned was the Aquari equivalent of a human frown. She kept shaking the device gently, as if that might somehow make the readings make more sense. "I think we need to have a different kind of conversation," he said kindly, gesturing toward the door. "Would you mind coming to my office? I have some displays there that might help explain what you're seeing." Veltara looked up at him with what could only be described as desperation. "Dr. Kim, I've spent my entire career studying alien biology. I pride myself on understanding how different species work. But these readings, they're telling me that humans shouldn't be able to walk, let alone think and talk normally." "Trust me," he said with a gentle smile. "I think I understand your confusion better than you might expect." They walked down the corridor together, passing several other humans going about their daily routines. Veltara found herself scanning each one with her portable device, and each time the results were the same: impossibly high heart rates, fragile-looking bones, and biological systems that seemed to be operating far outside normal parameters. Dr. Kim's office was smaller than she had expected, but comfortable and well-organized. The walls were covered with certificates and degrees, along with several photographs of humans in various settings. What caught her attention immediately, though, were the large holographic displays that dominated one wall. "Let me show you something that most galactic species find quite unusual about human biology," he said, activating the display system. The wall lit up with a detailed 3-dimensional image of human anatomy, showing organs, bones, and circulatory systems in brilliant detail. "This is our kidney system," he explained, highlighting 2 bean-shaped organs in the lower back area. "Now here's something interesting. We have 2 kidneys, but we only actually need 1 to survive quite comfortably." Veltara stared at the display, her gill slits fluttering rapidly. In Aquari physiology, this was a clear sign of shock or extreme surprise. 2 kidneys? But why would evolution create duplicate organs? "It gets better," Dr. Kim continued, clearly enjoying her reaction. "We can actually donate 1 kidney to save another human's life. The donor continues living normally with just 1 kidney, and the recipient gets a chance at a healthy life. Redundant organs?" Veltara's voice was barely a whisper. "That's incredibly wasteful from an evolutionary standpoint. Every species I've studied has optimized their biology for maximum efficiency. Extra organs mean extra energy consumption, extra resources needed, extra points of potential failure. Dr. Kim's smile grew wider. Is it wasteful, though? Let me tell you about some of the people working on this station. He switched the display to show the human liver, a large organ in the upper abdomen. Choi Jae-min, one of our best engineers, was in a serious accident last month. A piece of machinery fell on him and damaged about half of his liver. According to most galactic medical standards, that should have been fatal. And he died? Veltara asked, though something in Dr. Kim's tone suggested otherwise. He's working 2 levels down from us right now, completely healthy. The human liver can regenerate itself. Within a few months, his liver will be back to full size and function, as if the accident never happened. Veltara gripped the edge of his desk, her legs suddenly feeling unsteady. Organs that regenerate? That's impossible. Organs are complex, specialized structures. They can't just regrow like simple tissues. Park De-hyun, our communications specialist you met earlier, survived a childhood illness that destroyed one of her lungs. She's been living with just one lung for 15 years now. She runs marathons as a hobby. The Aquari scientist felt her world tilting. Every principle of biology she had learned suggested that major organ loss meant death, or, at best, severe disability. Yet these humans were describing it as if it were a minor inconvenience. Oh Seung-ho functions completely normally, despite losing significant brain tissue during a combat mission, Dr. Kim continued casually. The human brain has remarkable plasticity. Other areas can take over the functions of damaged regions. Brain. Tissue regeneration? Veltara's voice cracked. That's not regeneration, that's neuroplasticity on a scale that shouldn't be possible. Most species, if they lose brain tissue, lose specific functions permanently. Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. That's what makes humans unique, I think. We didn't evolve to be the most efficient or the most specialized. We evolved to survive just about anything. He changed the display again, this time showing the human circulatory system. We have redundant blood pathways throughout our bodies. If major vessels are damaged, blood can reroute through smaller vessels. We can lose significant amounts of blood and still function. How much blood? Veltara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. A healthy human can lose about 15% of their blood volume and barely notice. Up to 30% and we can still function, though we'll feel weak. Most species would go into shock and die with much smaller blood losses. Veltara sank into a chair, her scanner forgotten in her lap. This explains the readings. Your cardiovascular system isn't failing, it's just operating at what would be emergency levels for any other species. Your bones aren't weak, they're designed to be flexible and self-repairing rather than rigid and permanent. Exactly, Dr. Kim said gently. We're not built for perfection, we're built for survival. She looked up at him with new understanding, dawning in her large, dark eyes. Your entire species is designed around the assumption that things will go wrong, that you'll be injured, that you'll lose organs, that you'll face situations that would kill other species. And when things do go wrong, he replied, we just keep going. For the first time since arriving at the station, Veltara began to understand that she wasn't studying a primitive species with inefficient biology. She was looking at something entirely new, a form of life that had sacrificed efficiency for something far more valuable, the ability to survive almost anything the universe could throw at them. The emergency klaxon cut through the peaceful atmosphere of the research station like a knife through silk. The sound was sharp, urgent, and immediate, designed to grab attention and demand action. Veltara had heard emergency alerts before on other stations and ships, but she had never seen a reaction, quite like what happened next. Hull breach in Section C, the computer's calm voice announced over the intercom system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, hull breach in Section C. Veltara watched in complete fascination as every human around her underwent what could only be described as an instant transformation. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside each of them, changing them from relaxed, casual beings into something entirely different. Dr. Kim, who had been explaining human anatomy just moments before, suddenly straightened up. His pupils, which had been normal-sized, expanded rapidly until his dark eyes looked almost black. His breathing changed from the slow, steady rhythm she had grown accustomed to into something much deeper and more deliberate. Each breath seemed to fill his entire chest, and she could actually see his heart rate increase through the pulse visible in his neck. His movements became sharp and precise, with no wasted motion. The casual, friendly demeanor disappeared, replaced by focused intensity. It was so dramatic that Veltara initially thought he was having some kind of medical emergency. "Dr. Kim, are you experiencing distress?" she asked, pulling out her scanner to check his vital signs. "I'm fine," he replied curtly, already moving toward the door. "We need to get to Section C and help with the emergency response." "Fascinating," she breathed, following him as he strode quickly down the corridor. "Your stress response system is activating. I can see the physiological changes happening in real time." As they moved through the station, Veltara observed the same transformation occurring in every human they passed. Their faces became more alert, their movements more purposeful. It was like watching an entire species shift into a different mode of existence. What she witnessed when they reached the emergency site defied everything she thought she knew about biology and physics. The hull breach had caused significant damage to Section C. Twisted metal beams had fallen from the ceiling. Emergency lights were flashing red and orange, and there was debris scattered everywhere. The air was filled with the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the sound of automatic systems trying to seal the breach. In the middle of this chaos, she saw engineer Young Min Ho trapped under a massive steel beam that had fallen across his legs. The beam was easily 3 meters long and appeared to weigh several hundred kilograms. Under normal circumstances, it would have required mechanical lifting equipment, maybe even a small crane to move it safely. Instead, his colleague Yoon Soo-jin, a woman who couldn't weigh more than 60 kilograms herself, simply walked over to the beam, grabbed it with both hands and lifted it aside as if it were made of lightweight plastic. Veltara's scanner went crazy as she pointed it at Soo-jin. The woman's muscle fiber activation was off the charts. Her heart rate had spiked to levels that should have caused cardiac arrest, and her brain was showing activity patterns that indicated extreme focus and determination. Yet she moved the beam with apparent ease, freeing Young Min Ho, who immediately stood up and began helping with other emergency tasks. "How is that possible?" Veltara whispered to herself, staring at her scanner readings. The physics alone should make that impossible, but the impossible just kept happening around her. Dr. Bae Young-suk, the station's chief medical officer, was working on an injured crew member who had been cut by flying debris. What made this remarkable was that Dr. Bae herself had suffered a significant laceration across her left arm. Veltara could see the wound bleeding steadily, soaking through the makeshift bandage someone had quickly applied. Any other species would have been incapacitated by such an injury. The pain alone should have made complex thinking difficult, and the blood loss should have caused weakness and disorientation. Instead, Dr. Bae continued performing intricate medical procedures on her patient, her hands steady and her concentration complete. She was inserting a breathing tube, monitoring vital signs, and coordinating with other medical staff as if nothing was wrong with her at all. Her movements were precise and confident, showing no signs of pain or reduced cognitive function. "The human stress response," Dr. Kim explained, noticing Veltara's amazement, "doesn't just prepare us to run away or freeze up like most species. It actually makes us more capable." He was right. While her own people, the Aquari, would have entered a protective state during such an emergency, shutting down non-essential functions and focusing only on survival, these humans were doing the opposite. They were becoming enhanced versions of themselves. "Your bodies are releasing chemical compounds that block pain, increase strength, and sharpen mental focus," she observed, watching her scanner track the changes. "It's like temporary biological enhancement." Lee Min ran past them carrying equipment that should have required 2 people to lift. Park So-young was coordinating multiple repair teams while simultaneously calculating complex engineering solutions in her head. Every human she could see was operating at levels that exceeded their normal capabilities. "Most species shut down during crisis," Veltara said in wonder. "You power up." Within 30 minutes, the emergency was over. The hull breach was sealed, the injured were treated, and the station was secure. As the immediate danger passed, Veltara watched the humans gradually return to their normal state. Heart rate slowed, pupils contracted, and the intense focus softened back into casual alertness. But what struck her most was how they talked about what had just happened. To them, it was routine. They discussed the emergency with the same tone they might use to talk about the weather. Young Min-ho thanked Soo-jin for moving the beam as if she had simply passed him a tool, not performed what should have been a physically impossible feat. Dr. Bae finally allowed someone to properly treat her wound, joking that she hadn't even noticed it during the emergency. The idea that pain could be completely ignored during crisis seemed normal to these humans. Veltara realized she wasn't just studying a species with backup organs and redundant systems. She was looking at beings who could temporarily transform themselves into enhanced versions of their normal selves whenever survival demanded it. They didn't just endure crisis, they became more powerful because of it. 3 months had passed since Veltara first stepped aboard the human research station, and now she found herself standing in the most prestigious scientific chamber in the galaxy. The Galactic Medical Consortium's main hall was a massive space that could hold representatives from hundreds of different species. Today, it was packed to capacity. Floating above the assembled crowd was her holographic report, displaying charts, graphs, and video footage that documented everything she had learned about human biology. The chamber buzzed with conversations in dozens of different languages as xenobiologists, medical researchers, and evolutionary scientists tried to process what they were seeing. Veltara took a deep breath, her gill slits fluttering slightly, with nervousness. She had presented research findings many times before, but never anything quite like this. Never anything that challenged the fundamental assumptions that every advanced civilization held about how evolution was supposed to work. "Honored colleagues," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "After 3 months of intensive study, I can now present my conclusions about the species known as humans." The room fell quiet, with hundreds of eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs focused entirely on her. "In conclusion," she stated clearly, "humans represent a completely novel evolutionary strategy. Where we achieved perfection through specialization, they achieved dominance through redundancy and adaptability." The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Zeftal of the crystalline hegemony, whose voice rang out like chimes in the wind. His species was among the most advanced in the galaxy, having evolved bodies made of living crystal that were virtually indestructible and incredibly efficient. "Dr. Veltara," he said, his tone carrying a note of challenge, "are you suggesting that these primitive humans are somehow superior to our highly evolved forms?" Veltara had expected this question. She knew that many species in the galaxy took great pride in their evolutionary achievements. The crystalline hegemony had eliminated all biological weaknesses. The Vorthak had perfected energy efficiency to the point where they barely needed to eat. Her own people, the Aquari, had developed gills so advanced they could extract oxygen from almost any liquid. "Not superior, Dr. Zeftal," she corrected gently. "Different. Fundamentally, remarkably different. They sacrificed efficiency for something that we bred out of ourselves eons ago, the ability to survive what should be unsurvivable." She activated a section of her display showing footage from the emergency she had witnessed on the research station. The assembled scientists watched in fascination as they saw Yoon Soo-jin lift that massive beam, Dr. Bae Young-suk performing surgery while injured, and dozens of humans working together under conditions that would have incapacitated most other species. "When we face mortal threat," Veltara explained, "our bodies do what evolution taught them to do. We shut down non-essential functions, conserve energy, and prepare for death with dignity. It's logical, efficient, and sensible." She paused, letting her words sink in. When humans face the same mortal threat, their bodies do something completely different. They enhance all functions, ignore pain, increase strength, and prepare for war. They don't accept death, they fight it with everything they have. The chamber fell completely silent as the implications of her words settled over the assembled scientists. These beings represented some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had spent millions of years perfecting themselves, eliminating weaknesses, maximizing efficiency. They were the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement. And yet these primitive newcomers possessed biological capabilities that their advanced civilizations had abandoned long ago in their pursuit of perfection. Dr. Zeth Mora, of the Ephemeral Collective, spoke up, her gaseous form shimmering with curiosity. Are you saying that our evolutionary path was wrong? Not wrong, Veltara replied carefully, but perhaps incomplete. We optimized for perfection in ideal conditions. Humans optimized for survival in terrible conditions. Both approaches have value, but in different circumstances. She displayed more data showing human recovery rates, their ability to function with damaged organs, their capacity to heal from injuries that would be permanently disabling to other species. The question we must ask ourselves, she continued, is whether perfection that cannot adapt is truly superior to imperfection that cannot be destroyed. After her presentation ended and the formal session concluded, Veltara found herself fielding questions from dozens of researchers. Some were skeptical, others fascinated, and a few seemed almost frightened by the implications of her findings. It took several hours before she could finally escape the crowds and return to the human research station. She had requested to extend her assignment there, and the consortium had agreed. There was still so much to learn about these remarkable beings. She found Dr. Kim in the medical bay, running routine diagnostic scans on several crew members. The sight of him working with his simple but effective equipment, surrounded by humans who were casually defying galactic medical understanding just by existing normally, made her smile. Dr. Kim, she said softly, approaching his workstation. He looked up with that warm, genuine smile she had grown to appreciate. Veltara, how did the presentation go? I owe your species an apology, she said, her voice carrying a note of deep respect. Kim looked confused, setting down his diagnostic tool. An apology? For what? For underestimating you, for thinking you were primitive, for assuming that efficiency was the highest goal of evolution. She paused, watching him work with new appreciation and understanding. We spent millions of years perfecting ourselves, eliminating every inefficiency, removing every redundancy. You spent the same time making yourselves unbreakable. She gestured toward the humans moving around the medical bay, each one a walking miracle of biological engineering that prioritized survival over perfection. Perhaps there's wisdom in your approach that we've forgotten, she continued. Perhaps, in our rush to become perfect, we made ourselves fragile. You remained beautifully, wonderfully imperfect, and that made you stronger than any of us. Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment, then smiled. I think every species finds their own path through evolution. Yours brought you to the stars and gave you incredible knowledge. Ours kept us alive long enough to eventually join you out here. Veltara nodded, understanding now why the galaxy felt different with humans in it. They didn't just represent another species to catalog and study. They represented hope that survival was possible, that imperfection could be strength, and that sometimes the best way to face an uncertain universe was not with flawless efficiency, but with stubborn determination to keep going no matter what. Looking around the medical bay, watching humans go about their daily routines with their impossible biology and their refusal to accept defeat, she realized that the galaxy had gained something precious, a species that would never give up. And perhaps, in a universe full of dangers and uncertainties, that was the most valuable trait of all.